Hi there. This is Adam Davey from Patorum Solutions, and I'm really pleased to be joined today by Chris Owen from Optimum Safety Management. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Adam.
How's it going? We're putting homeworking into practice today, Chris, and holding this meeting via Zoom.
Yeah, it's a new one for me, but looking forward to it.
Excellent, good stuff. So really the purpose of today's session is to try and pick Chris's brains on the health and safety and risk considerations for businesses to think about if you've got staff who are working from home. Chris's business are absolutely experts in what they do, so there's really no better person to be asking these sorts of questions of. So, Chris, I've got a range of questions here for you, and really just to start off, what should a business be thinking about, and what might they need to have in place in terms of the workstation or display screen equipment considerations when people are actually going to work from their own house or another remote location?
Okay, so for temporary workers, there's no real formal assessment that they need to do of their workstation because it's temporary working only. If it was more formal, if it was more long term, then we would have to do a formal DSE assessment of it. But because it's temporary, you don't actually need to do that. What the company needs to do is provide the workers with the correct equipment to use while they're working at home. So
Okay.
whether that's a computer or whether that's a laptop, it needs to be suitable for the purpose that they're doing. Also, what they'll need to do is, if it's on a laptop, it's ideal to provide a keyboard and a separate mouse. So separate keyboard, separate mouse. So, and the screen is lifted up, so that's on a laptop riser. So at home I have a riser that I put my laptop on. I have it away from the front of me. I have a keyboard at the front, and I use a separate mouse as well. And then it's more of a normal like workstation. Okay. If you're on a normal computer and you've taken your whole computer home, set it up how you would have it in the office, exactly the same as you would have in the office. You've already probably had a DSE assessment done in the office anyway, so it's just taking that away. If it's laptop, it's a bit different. Try and rise it so your eye level's with the top of the screen, and set it away from you with a keyboard and with a mouse if possible.
So you're certainly not advocating perching it on your knee while sitting on the sofa?
It's not ideal, no, it's not ideal. I know some people do that, maybe on the arm of the settee, but for longer term use, really you want it sat down, you want it in front, and you want to replicate the office as much as you can, really.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying there, Chris, is if it's a short-term stint of working from home, just common sense prevails. If it's
absolutely
longer term or a permanent arrangement, then you need to get some proper assessments in place and make sure that the proper equipment is being used.
Yeah, that's correct. Actually, I mean, because this is only going to be hopefully for a couple of months, we don't know, but because it is only short term, there'll be no long-term damage or anything like that with how you're setting your DSE equipment up at the moment. If it's anything longer term, then you have to look at a longer term solution, but temporary, there's no need to have anything formal in place, just the right equipment to do the job that you're expected to do.
Okay, fantastic. And what about breaks? I mean, if people are at their normal workplace, then there's a natural process of either scheduled breaks, or maybe if you're in an office environment, actually wandering off to make a cup of coffee with some colleagues and maybe have a bit of a natter at the kitchen whilst you're waiting for the kettle to boil. That may or may not be the case if you're working from home. Are there any requirements that tell us how often we need to take a break away from work?
Really, it's the same as the office, really. You should be taking, say, a 5-minute break every hour. That's sort of the rule of thumb. It's exactly the same in the office. So whether you take yourself away, you make yourself tea, coffee, whatever your choice of drink is, go and play with the kids outside for 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes. It's the same as, really. Just take a break. 5 minutes every hour. If you want to have it sooner than that, you're at home, so have it sooner, but it's really just taking yourself away. It might even be that you don't take yourself away from your work area where you are. you just look away from the screen and you write something, you make some notes, you do something like that. It's just about taking your eyes, diverting your eyes away from the screen so you're not staring at it. It's not great to have a 5-minute break and go straight on your phone or straight on looking at something on a tablet or anything like that. You need to take your eyes away from the screen, really. That's the rule of thumb, 5 minutes every hour.
Okay, no, that sounds sensible. What about lone working then, Chris? People will be working away from their normal day-to-day colleagues, won't they, when they're remote working? I guess at the moment, because of the current situation, everyone is likely to have perhaps some other people in the house. But if it's a more permanent arrangement, you could actually be working at home or in a remote location on your own. What sorts of things should we have in place?
That's good. Contact, really. Contact. I think it's really important for managers, line managers, supervisors, or management, that they have a contacting procedure for all people that are alone working from home, especially people if they do live on their own as well. Because you have people that are alone working that are, in the house with their families and that, and they have interaction with people, and you have people that are actually alone on their own working. So regular contact is really important. That could be via telephone, via email, via Zoom, via something streaming like we are. But it's really, really important that contact is kept. And that could be every day, every other day, whatever you deem is appropriate to do that. But there should always be contact with people. Have a emergency contact as well, like you would have in the office, really, if anything is concerning anybody. I mean, another thing to look at is people's mental health at this stage as well. So regular contact is really, really important. We're all isolated at the moment, so it's nice to hear from people as well. It's nice to keep in contact. It doesn't have to be management either. It can be fellow colleagues as well. Just ringing people up for a 5-minute chat.
I think it just goes to show, Chris, that actually, the key factor really in lots of these things is about applying common sense and continuing to do those good things that you would do if people were working in the same location. And I think particularly if you're the leader of a business or in a management position, actually part and parcel of your responsibility, part of your job is that duty of care for your staff. So actually, regardless of where they're working, it serves many different purposes, doesn't it? Whether it's minimising health and safety risk, driving good engagement with your staff, or really just, as I said earlier, that duty of care element. It's all good practice.
It is, absolutely. And it's really important that employees feel valued as well. Because if you're keeping in contact with them, they're going to be more productive when they're working from home as well at the end of the day. And it's just that regular contact. It's that, as you've said, the duty of care that the employer has to their employee. They have it in the office. They have regular meetings, supervision, and different things like that. Well, it's about having that supervision at home with their employees while they are alone working. It's really important.
Okay, no, that's great. So what would you do then? Perhaps if you're working from home, the doorbell rings, you get up quickly and you trip over your laptop cable and do yourself a mischief. You have a bit of a nasty accident, bang your face on the door frame on the way down. Is that classed as an accident at work? Does it have to be reported? What would we do in that situation?
That's an interesting point, actually. Again, this comes down to duty of care. You mentioned it early on in the previous comment. Employees have a duty of care to their employees at all times, wherever they're working remotely, when they're driving for work, anything like that. And it's the same for when they're working at home. So it goes back to the providing the right information, the right equipment and everything at the time when they were asked to work from home. Regarding accidents, anything when you're working from home generally is low risk anyway. Okay, so we're all talking about low risk. One of the main hazards, as you've just pointed out, is tripping hazards. We need to keep those to a minimum. Okay. With regards to working from home and having an accident, it's about, if you do have it, ringing your manager, finding out what the accident was, if there are any injuries, and they will make then a judgment of if it needs recording or if it needs reporting to the HSE. Again, it will be a low risk one anyway, but these things do happen, but it's about getting that right advice at the right time.
Yeah, so maintain the same standards and discipline
Absolutely.
as you would if you were in your normal place of work.
That's correct. Absolutely. It's just been it's whatever's reasonable, really. You know, you've got to make sure that the equipment you're using is correct for what you're using. You cut down on tripping hazards. You cut down on anything that could potentially cause an accident or an injury, and being sensible about it. But it's having that point of contact again with your manager or with an external consultant to advise on if something you need to take steps further, or if it's just a case of it might need logging in the accident book or further action might need to be taken.
Okay, no, that's helpful. Thanks, Chris. What about insurance? You know, we'll all have workplace insurances in place should something like an accident arise. As the employer, would I need to think about ringing my insurer to make sure that employees are covered to work from home?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you made, actually. Yeah, I would say when it comes to insurance and working from home, hopefully it should all be covered, but I would check with your insurance company on the fine detail of what it says in there. If you haven't done that already, it's really important that I think all company in management should check that first to make sure that employees are covered from working at home.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you, Chris. So before we wrap up with this session, you know, any sort of summarising pearls of wisdom, Chris? Are there any what's the key message that you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
One thing I haven't actually mentioned is about risk assessment. It's really important that employees are covered under a risk assessment while they're working from home to make sure that the employers hit all the points that they should do in controlling any risks that there are. It can be done generally under a generic risk assessment that the employees can email. They can email it to their employees to make sure that they are covering everything, to make sure that they look at electrical safety, any trip hazards, anything that could potentially cause any harm. When it comes to young people, so if any young persons, apprentices, 16, 17, a separate risk assessment would need doing for them, on top of the generic one, to make sure that all points are being covered with them. If you've got any newer expectant mothers that are working from home as well, they need to be covered under a separate risk assessment. So it's really important. It doesn't have to be a big paper chain. It doesn't have to be reams and reams of paper. It just needs to be a simple but concise risk assessment to make sure that all employees are covered whilst they are working at home, that all points are being hit. And while I'm working, everything we've covered should be in that risk assessment.
That's really good advice, Chris. Really good advice. So make sure that risk assessments are up to date, fit for purpose, and properly documented.
Absolutely, yeah. It's just about being sensible when you're working from home. Treat it as if you're in the office. It shouldn't be any more formal or any more less formal, really. You might have your laptop on the side of the couch or something like that, but where you can, set up a station if you can. You'll be more productive that way. Just make sure you have regular breaks and take care and stay safe, really.
That's great advice, Chris. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Really do appreciate it, and we'll be in touch soon.